Great to have you here, Amanda. I'm really excited to hear some of your story because I know you've been doing some really interesting stuff for a long time within the oncology massage space. But before we get into what you're doing right now, I just want to go back to when you first started. Tell me a little bit about what you were first doing in massage, what business was like for you back then.
Well, actually, I never thought that I would be a massage therapist. Initially, I was training to be an archeologist or a history teacher. And so through my studies, I ended up working part-time. And once my studies finished, I decided that I didn't want to go down that course anymore. And so I slowly made my way up the corporate ladder and led teams, and I worked in a call center. And I got to a place where, although I really liked my job and I loved the people that I worked with, I was not necessarily very fulfilled and I was quite stressed. So I actually started doing massage just as something to learn outside of work because I was just a little bored. And prior to that, I'd just come back from a trip from Thailand, and you know, when you're in Thailand, you do what everyone does and you go and get Thai massage. And I loved Thai massage. And when I came home, I was kind of practicing on my partner at the time, and he was kind of like, oh, you're pretty good at this. So then that gave me the confidence to go and, I guess, study massage. But even when I was studying it, I never actually saw myself as a massage therapist. I was just there because I wanted to learn a little bit about health, maybe some moves that I could use at home to like treat my friends and family, but that was about it. And it was so much so that I didn't actually really enjoy the remedial massage side of things. And it wasn't until we had a unit on lymphatics that I became really interested in the niche or the field that I'm now in. So I think I was one of the very few people who were actually interested in lymphatics. I found it super fascinating. I mean, it was a system that I hadn't really heard of much before. And yeah, I found it really fascinating. So my teacher said to me, if you're really interested in this, why don't you go and see this woman who practices lymphatic drainage, go and get a treatment off her. And yeah, the rest is kind of history, I guess, but that's where it kind of started. So I never thought I'd be a massage therapist, really.
So what actually happened? Like, you've got this massage as a bit of a hobby. You've gone to see this lymphatic person. You're managing a team at a call center. Was there like a boom from heaven and a voice or something? Like, what made you want to change and actually have that transition?
I guess I just was feeling genuinely unfulfilled. Like, I had the opportunity to continue to kind of rise in the leadership team, but I was finding it really stressful. And when I was performing lymphatic drainage, I just was able to go into this really calm, peaceful, zoned out space. And I just loved it. So when I went and had this treatment with her, it was kind of like, wow, this is a really powerful, beautiful practice. And yeah, over time, she sort of took me under her wing, told me about the courses that I could do to learn more about it. It's quite a sciencey subject, learning lymphatics, because it's all about the lymphatic system and the immune system and how it works together with the circulatory system. So I was like, wow, this is amazing. And then at the same time, in my personal life, I split from my partner. So I ended up quitting my job, selling my house, and going to India. And then it kind of just went from there.
That is like a voice boom. That's a big life event. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
And so then I guess you're in a place where a whole lot of upheaval in life has led to this kind of change. But obviously then you've stepped into it with volition. You've, I assume, come back from India, or did you practice in India? What was the story there?
I hadn't fully finished my qualifications because my life was a little messy at the time. I kind of was able to pause my training. I went to India and I studied a little bit of Ayurvedic massage and medicine and did a lot of yoga, a lot of yogic practice. And then so when I came, or while I was away, my mentor was always like, when are you coming back? When are you coming back? And it was like, okay, now it's time after this break to come back and dive head on in. So once I think I went to India and I had a break and I studied massage, that was when it really cemented that I wanted to move forward into that space. But I still wasn't fully sure of what that looked like. Yeah.
And how did business look for you at that time then? Because one of the things I know about business is you've got to be fairly committed to make a good go of it. It's easy enough to get maybe a handful of clients here and there. But when you're first starting, if you're not really putting much energy into the whole thing, what was that experience like for you?
So when I came back, I went back, finished the qualification, which was the Castley-Smith method. And from there, I just had more and more exposure to lymphatic drainage and clients who needed that type of treatment. So my mentor was able to, I was subcontracting at the time. So I'd already finished my remedial massage and I'd done my postgraduate study in the Castley-Smith method. And then, I just was learning more and more. But what I found was I still wasn't really sure, or I didn't really have a great understanding of where my clients had been at that particular point in time, like the experiences that they had had with cancer up until that point. They would share stories with me, but I fully didn't understand. And I never really had anyone in my life up until that point who had been through a cancer experience. So that's where I went and studied a little bit more with Oncology Massage Australia. And I did all 4 of the units, including the hospital placement training. And that just gave me a much better understanding of what my clients had been through, because that was a missing gap in my understanding. And it didn't stop me from treating, but I think knowing that information helped me to become a better practitioner with the skill set that I had already had in lymphatics.
Yeah, okay. So at that point, you're focusing in on lymphatics. Does that mean most of your clients were going through oncology treatment, or were there other lymphatic things?
Yeah, some of the clients were going through active treatment. And so what that would usually look like would be things like they'd had surgery with perhaps chemotherapy to come, or they'd already had chemotherapy and surgery and perhaps radiation to come, or, some kind of various combination of those types of treatments. And we were dealing with either persistent or concerning fluid that can arise as a result of those treatments.
Yeah, okay. So for someone who might not be that familiar with what lymphatic drainage is or how it relates to oncology, do you want to just talk about what's actually happening, I don't know, in the body? Or not too scientific for this sort of level right now, I'm not that clever, but just sort of explain to us simply what's going on with this.
So essentially, your lymphatic system is the body's sewage system, and we've got millions and millions of vessels all throughout our body, and a majority of these vessels are in a pinch of skin. We've also got lots of larger vessels and organs that are a part of the lymphatic system. And so what typically happens during cancer treatment, there will either be disruption or damage to the lymphatic system through the practice of either chemotherapy or more so radiation and surgery. And so women need assistance, men and women will need assistance to help to rehab through their recovery, essentially. And so what can happen is fluid can pool in certain areas. For the most part, the body will be able to deal with the influx of fluid that derives as a part of surgery or becomes stagnant or doesn't flow as easily because of surgery. Typically, scars can also help, or not help, but they can interrupt the flow of this fluid. So essentially, we're helping to just support the lymphatic system during that phase. Now, a lot of women and men don't necessarily get the support that they need, or they're not advised, or even perhaps they're just dealing with a cancer diagnosis. There's lots of emotional chaos. They may have been told about how to support their system, but they've got other things going on and it's not a priority. And then later on, it can become an issue developing, and people can develop things like lymphedema. So we're really there to support their lymphatic journey, because there are stages of the development of lymphedema, and it can be managed and even prevented in earlier stages if it's caught early. So that's essentially what we're doing. We're just making people more comfortable, because it can affect things like movement, so their reach becomes affected. When you have fluid, it becomes painful or uncomfortable. It can also contribute to things like numbness. There can also be issues in and around the joint. So it can have a lot of, I would say, it's not a great experience when you're unsure of how to treat or look after yourself, because no one really talks about these kinds of aspects of cancer recovery.
Yeah, and it is a time, you're right, that can be highly emotional for the people involved as well. So I imagine that's part of it too. It sounds also something where I think in the last few years anyway, massage therapists seem to have become more aware as a whole of oncology treatment and how massage can help with that.
Mm-hmm.
What about the
Yeah.
actual medical profession? Like, it sounds like you've been doing this for a while. Have you noticed a change in the way the actual doctors and surgeons and other support team members are interacting with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So the breast care nurses are usually the point of contact, because I personally work with a lot of women after breast cancer, but I do see a whole range of people with different types of cancers as well. But specifically in the breast cancer arena, breast care nurses are usually quite the advocate for this post-cancer recovery, this post-cancer aftercare, and they will usually make a referral. So either to myself or a lymphedema physio, who will also be able to point them in the right direction, because again, we're dealing with things like movement issues, we've got pain, discomfort. There's also the emotional aspects of cancer recovery as well. If you've had a breast removed, or there are a lot of tissue changes that can affect women's femininity, the way they feel about themselves, and it can then impact whether or not they return to work. All sorts of emotional aspects of cancer are really kicked up during this time. So breast care nurses are really key in that. Also, physiotherapists are also really key in referral, and even surgeons these days are more readily encouraging women to go and seek some additional support with their recovery, where that wasn't as heavily recommended as what it is now.
Yeah, okay.
And
Well, that's
also,
positive.
yeah, breast cancer support groups are also becoming a very big advocate for this type of aftercare as well.
Yeah, okay, that's great. And it's great to hear that you've obviously had a lot of experience and you understand how all of that sort of support network that is around is working.
Yeah.
What about for you? Like, as someone working with people with cancer, is that difficult emotionally for you to be involved with that kind of environment?
I have personally never found it difficult. You definitely create some amazing connections with the clients that you're working with. And every woman that I work with, her journey and her experience is also very unique. But in that uniqueness, there are also a lot of patterns and similarities, and that ranges from, personality or experiences leading up to the cancer diagnosis, right through to the experiences with their treatment. And then also the things that can happen, the challenges that arise, during the recovery phase as well. So I feel like the only time that it does become somewhat difficult is if there is a recurrence after all of the treatment, or if somebody is in a little bit of denial as to where they are in their prognosis, which, most women do survive breast cancer, but, it does happen that clients do pass away, and that can be challenging. But I just do my best to support them through whatever they're going through and try and create a space for them that's really nurturing and calming, and because a lot of the time they just want to rest, or they want somebody to speak to, or perhaps they're after a little bit of reassurance, like, is this normal what I'm experiencing in terms of physical aspects and even emotional, or even linking them in with other women who are having to make similar choices around surgery or reconstructive surgery, or whether to even stay flat, as in not have any reconstruction. So yeah, I don't find it particularly challenging or difficult, but yeah, some days, are easier than others.
Yeah, that's great. I guess in one sense, it reminds me a little bit of when I speak with people who do aged care massage. And it's like, you're going to have great relationships with a lot of clients, but sometimes there are just those difficult times, right? And it's kind of part and parcel of being there to help someone when they're going through such a challenging personal time can be an amazing, what an amazing gift to be able to give someone to help them in that stage. But the reverse of that is also true. You can build up these great relationships that can be challenging sometimes. What if you don't mind, I want to return back to the business side of things just for a minute.
Yeah.
Like, we're talking about, you seem so natural talking about the team members that are here supporting these women or men. And you seem to kind of know your place in that team quite well and who to connect with and how to do that. When you first started, how did that work? Like, did you have to just, I don't know, call people, or did you get clients directly until you learned how those teams worked? What was that experience like for you?
When I was working under my mentor, she had built really great networks with a lot of the support systems out there. She was also quite known with the hospital staff and the breast care nurse in the area as well. So what happened with me, eventually, once I felt like I had learned everything that I needed to learn, I decided to relocate my business up into the Northern Rivers. And so I had to start from scratch. I was a little known therapist in Wollongong. And then when I moved up here, I didn't know anyone. I didn't have any contacts. So I really had to reach out to the support networks and let them know that I was here. And I also so networking was a huge part of it. And, typically speaking, I would attempt to run some Facebook ads, but there were some challenges with that because of the wording that I would not be able to use online because Facebook would flag it. So sometimes I had to get quite creative and explain, I guess, what I was offering to women at various points of their recovery. So a lot of my clients would also come through advertising and direct marketing, but I would say a majority of my clients came through word of mouth, but I had to really work hard to, create those connections so that I was getting those referrals. And that also meant, in addition to breast care nurses, it was things like physiotherapists, acupuncturists, anyone else who was having contact with these women for supportive care, I was, reaching out to.
Yeah, fantastic. And you sound really confident with that too, by the way, Amanda. That's really good to hear that you're just able to step in and be that person who knows who you are, knows your place and their place, respects what they're doing, as well as having your own authority within your space. It's a really great place to be coming into business like that. And I guess, you've also answered part of my next question, but I was sort of thinking about other people who might be listening to this and thinking, well, I've heard of oncology massage, or I'm thinking of doing that as a sort of form of getting some speciality here, specializing into that. If someone is kind of looking at that, what's your advice on how to step into that, or whether they should or not? Because it seems like it's a growing area within the kind of massage. It's a growing niche, a growing need in the community. And what is it, like 1 out of every 3 people in Australia at some point is going to experience cancer or something like that. You probably know the stats better than I do with that.
That sounds about right. The 1 in 3, which is quite alarming. Yeah.
And it's something that obviously has a big need there. So if people are kind of looking at that, what would your advice be?
So I would find a mentor, because even once you have actually done a lot of the training, you do need a certain level of confidence and almost fearlessness, because especially if you've come from a background where you've not dealt with cancer yourself and you've not had cancer yourself, there will be sort of gaps in your knowledge. So I would recommend working in with a mentor, because they're going to be able to give you second opinions and advice and give you structure around some things that you might need to be aware of. And you will have that in your training. So things like the Casley-Smith method or the VODA method. But you're still wanting to sort of get yourself thrown into the deep end. And that can be a little bit overwhelming, especially when you're dealing with people who have recently had surgery or they're having upcoming treatments. Like, the level of anxiety in this client type can be quite high. And some people do breeze through and have really good positive outlooks, but sometimes the emotional responses, they can vary from person to person. And so it's always really important to have somebody who you can go and speak to about particular case histories or things that are coming up with a particular client. That's one thing that I would absolutely recommend. And I would also recommend that if you've not had any exposure to what a cancer experience is like, to most definitely go and do the oncology massage training, because that'll give you access to seeing what the machines are like, what the hospital environment's like, because even that in of itself, although some hospitals are run really well and they do provide a great standard of care, some hospitals do that a little better than others. So that means that some clients will be they've not had a great experience, and there's a lot of anger in and around, the diagnosis itself and their experience through the hospital system. And that's where we as massage therapists can scoop them up and provide them with an additional or a complementary level of care that they may not always receive in a hospital environment.
Yeah, that's great advice. And also, again, I'm just struck by how internally certain you are, Amanda. Like, you've got a lot of certainty around your role and who you are in that place. And being able to gather people in who are in emotional turmoil and care for them is an amazing thing to be able to do. Another question that comes to mind is, do you do something yourself to maintain that level of internal certainty or of maintaining your own mindset? What's your kind of mindset routine?
Well, it's interesting. It's grown over time. I certainly wasn't always this confident. I do have a certain level of fearlessness, but sometimes I have struggled with, self-doubt as to whether I could do things or like step into a particular role of really caretaking for someone. So I think I rely a lot on my personal spirituality. So I try and maintain a really healthy self-concept, if that makes sense. So what I mean by that is if I feel like I'm a little bit nervous or unsure of myself, I try and do as many mindset things as I possibly can. And so that will include lots of meditations. That'll include listening to like binaural beats with affirmations and things like that, just so I can like step into that role. And then over time, I kind of have just developed a way to embody that. That's not to say that I do it perfectly all of the time. And especially when I'm challenging myself through new roles and things that I'm doing, I do find that, I fall back a little bit with my confidence, but I know that I have that skill set or that tool there to, I don't know, sit in and then go forward from that place.
I love that.
Yeah.
And a lot of those things, like meditation is called a practice for a reason, right? Because you've got to keep doing it. You keep practicing it.
Yeah.
And what I always say is it's great to have the tools in your tool belt, but unless you use them, they're not doing anything either. So you kind of learn how to meditate, you learn some of the other stuff. But what it means is then when you do go through challenges, you can have the tool and pull it out and use it. It's only in the using that it actually has use, that it has benefits. So I absolutely love that.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when I would first go and speak at support groups, I used to get genuinely really nervous beforehand. So public speaking was, one of those areas where I had to really focus in on, I guess, experiencing the nervousness and a little bit of the anxiety and using that to like propel myself forward in a way. But I always have this saying where it's like, like confidence and resilience is really just me knowing that I'll be able to figure it out. And I've also, with perfectionism, like always being concerned about saying the right thing or trying to like be the best at something, that doesn't always serve. So I just try and show up in the most authentic way that I can. And I find that that's the best way for me to kind of move forward through any times where I might not be feeling so confident.
That's spot on as well.
Yeah.
How do you, because I love what you're saying there about kind of the balance or the tug of war between perfectionism and authenticity. And often we can look at both of those things as being great. Of course we want to be perfect or as perfect as we possibly can. We want to get things right. We want to make sure we're looking good as we do it. And at the same time, authenticity is often about being real and acknowledging that getting towards perfection can be a struggle. And we're never really going to get to be as perfect as we would like to. How do you find that balance? No, we're going a little bit deeper here, maybe, Amanda, but what's that like for you, that sort of tug of war?
I think that I've had to learn, and sometimes the hard way, that perfection is just, it doesn't serve anyone. Like no one expects me to be perfect in everything that I do. So I now just try and show up in the best way that I can and rely on the tools and the skills that I have. And if I am feeling a little nervous, I just kind of let people know. And I think people are pretty genuine and forgiving. And I think that makes or helps you to connect with people a little more because, they're probably going through that as well. So yeah, when you just try and sound a little too clever and you're using complicated language and then you end up fumbling anyway, it's like I just sort of drop the mask a little and just present as I am and hope that's enough. And a lot of the times, or most of the time it is. So that's how I balance it.
I love that. And it's also the idea that when you are being authentic and stepping out and showing that even if I am imperfect, I'm still doing this anyway. I'm here giving the value that I do have. It almost sets an example and gives permission for other people to do the same thing, to step out and try and do things, even if they're not perfect at it yet. And so that can be really valuable, especially in the context of a support network, like a bunch of people who are literally there because they're going through something that is not the perfect ideal, they're going through something that is a challenge, it's a great way of being able to connect with them and encourage them forward, you know, encourage them to be able to keep growing and moving and healing. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so across this whole thing, you've spent a bunch of time learning about lymphatics, getting some great experience, having a mentor, doing a whole lot of this work, meeting some amazing people. Is there one moment you would look at across that whole journey and say, this was my favorite thing? This is just the best moment where I felt really proud of myself or something really good happened?
I think that happens in many moments for me, because I remember 5 years ago, before I moved up to northern New South Wales, I was a little hesitant around whether or not I could actually do this, because before I had the support of my mentor, and she had a pretty amazingly set up business with networking and all of that kind of going on in the background, and it was running really smoothly. And, you know, when I had a corporate job, that was all kind of taken care of as well. But I just felt I had this, I was uncertain, but I took the leap anyway, and I just figured it out as I went along. And I think that was, looking back, because I like to reflect every now and again, because you sort of get caught up with just doing the do every day, and you're like, wow, 5 years ago, this was an idea that I had while I was sitting on a beach. And now here I am. I'm in the location that I want to be in. I'm like fully running a self-sufficient business. And yeah, sometimes I like to just reflect on that. And I try and do that once a week on a Sunday, and just feel into that, because that's something that I created over time. So I wouldn't say there's a particular moment that I'm proud of, but there's like moments throughout the week where I'm like, yes, I'm doing this. This is a thing. This is happening.
Yeah, and that sounds like another great practice too, to be able to reflect on how things have changed, to be proud of it, continue that momentum. What's next for you then, Amanda? Like, if we're looking at continuing the momentum, what do you see in the next few years coming up?
Yeah, I'm wanting to learn how to midwife the dying a little more. I feel like this is an area where death is a part of the human experience, and sometimes I am faced with this, as are my clients, and it's something that we're all going to go through, and I want to be able to help navigate those clients a little better when it comes to their journey. As I mentioned, not, you know, most women do survive their diagnosis, but there are some people that I feel like I can carry and support in a different way. And that's going to sort of touch a little bit more on the spiritual aspects of passing over and things like that. So that's one aspect of my career that I think I'm going to head into. And also, I have launched a program which is called the Breast Cancer Recovery Method, where I essentially teach women how to self-care throughout their breast cancer recovery phase. So I'm teaching them all of the things that I do in clinic in a 6-week program that includes videos and education and self-care practices, so that they can self-care at home. Because while coming to see me once a week or once a month is amazing, sometimes they do need to do a little bit more self-care at home. And I feel like this is a really great way to support and empower women to know what to do and to anticipate any challenges and setbacks. And they'll have all of the keys that they need to go through that process with much more grace and confidence.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming then that would be available not just for your clients either. You could be giving access to people all over Australia and the world potentially.
Yeah, especially with the state of the nation or the world, essentially, with COVID. You know, always having access to a practitioner is not always possible. So this way, people are getting access to support and community, but also those tools that they can continue to use in case they're not able to access a therapist. And you can still access a therapist or use the skills of a therapist, and it works in conjunction with that as well. So it's not taking away one from the other. It's meant to be more supportive and empowering. So yeah, that's my new channel, my new funnel. And I'm hoping that women embrace it, because it's a little fringe, it's a little new, like a new thing that's out there. So yeah, I'm just looking forward to being able to help more women.
That's fantastic. And it is new, but exactly like you said, the world is going that way, right? Lots of things are available online now that weren't 18 months ago. And the reverse is also true. A heap more clients out there are more used to accessing not just health information, but all sorts of things online they never would have even thought about doing in the past. So I think it's great. You're stepping into part of the way the world is right now, right? And looking towards the future. That's fantastic to be able to look at. What about, like, we've talked about a bunch of stuff and you've given some great advice. Thank you so much to listeners. You've talked about things like fearlessness and motivation and the practicalities of what you do as well. What would you say, maybe either out of all of that or even something else, what would you say is your one biggest piece of advice to maybe younger therapists or less experienced therapists who might be stepping into this space?
I guess be clear on your vision. Know you might not know exactly from the outset, but step forward into that, and also try and find people around you who can really support that vision and get behind you as well. I found that, I came from a corporate background, and I still didn't know many aspects of business, and you do have to become good at those other things in order to stay in business and to be able to continue to support people. So, learning all those little business admin things that no one really likes to learn is actually really important, because without it, it makes it more difficult to be able to fully step into this as a career. So once you have all of that in place, you'll be able to succeed. And so what I mean by that is go and work with particular coaches, because if I had to learn all of this stuff on my own, I think I would have given up. I think I would have dropped out a lot. I really do appreciate all of the support and the network that I've created. So if I ever have a problem or if I'm unsure of something, I at least know where to go and look for that information. Again, I don't have everything down pat all of the time, but I know where to go if I need extra help and support. So whether that be through a bookkeeper or an accountant, or, just other therapists who are a little bit further along the path than what I am, I can go to them for advice, and it just keeps me on track. It keeps me focused with the vision.
I love that. So being able to connect in and use support, which is interestingly, what I'm hearing from you, Amanda, is you're also part of that support network for a whole lot of your clients. It's something that you're obviously learning for your business and also then being part of for other people, which is a fantastic way to be. I love it. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Amanda. I've really enjoyed this chat, and I'm sure lots of people have been really interested to hear your story and some of the possibilities of oncology, massage and lymphatics and that kind of stuff. So thank you for being on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's been a pleasure.